Welcome to Reinventing Professionals, a podcast hosted by industry analyst Ari Kaplan, which shares ideas, guidance, and perspectives from market leaders shaping the next generation of legal and professional services.
This is Ari Kaplan, and I'm speaking today with Dan O'Day and Ted Kukorowski, co-founder and managing director for large law, respectively, at ECFX, a provider of an electronic notice management system. Dan, Ted, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you, Ari. Glad to be here. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Hello, Ari. It's nice to be with you.
It is great to speak with you both. Dan, tell us about your background and the genesis of ECFX.
Certainly. So I got started in legal at the age of 16. I was old enough to drive a car and therefore well qualified to be a court runner. Would run down the courthouse, get the documents stamped, and bring them back. I went on to be a paralegal at Paul Weiss in New York. Decided I would practice law for a while. And after practicing for a little over a year, decided it wasn't really in my nature. The practice of law can be a bit adversarial at times, especially since I was involved in litigation, and ended up going into technology for law firms and ended up at a company called Elite. That company was later acquired by Thomson Reuters. I had a long career at Thomson Reuters. I went on to do a couple things after that, but I kept hearing out there that people were still dealing with the electronic court notices in much the same way they dealt with the manual notices, except instead of scanning them in, they would get them in email. They'd get the PDFs already attached, but they still had to identify the case team, route them around, store them in the document management system, all of which took time. In some firms, it's several people's full-time jobs to do nothing but that. And it seemed like an opportunity to automate a mundane task. And I believe that's one of the best use of technology is to automate things that are mundane.
Ted, what challenges are law firms facing in their litigation management today?
Well, we see a lot of firms facing efficiency problems. I mean, there's a growing number of court notices, and being able to handle those efficiently can be very time consuming, as a lot of firms are dealing with, people leaving or just turnover in jobs and trying to replace people, bringing new people on board and showing them the processes that need to be done can be very time consuming. And so efficiency is probably the biggest challenge right now with handling court notices and litigation.
Dan, why is automation important in litigation?
Litigation is a huge expense, and there's a lot of talk about access to justice and other issues around litigation. And we all want due process for everyone. And in order really to bring those costs down and litigate efficiently, automation tools can help with that. If the lawyers can focus on the legal arguments and getting to the facts and to the law and applying it correctly, and not dealing with a lot of the mundane routing papers around and other aspects of litigation that involve a lot of labor, it should be able to help make litigation more efficient and less costly.
Ted, what are the risks associated with manually monitoring court deadlines?
Actually, the risks are just that, the deadlines. If I'm manually processing court notices, there's going to be a tremendous amount of time involved in that. Typical mass tort or a bankruptcy case today, it's not unheard of to get 50 notices by 10 o'clock in the morning on a big case. Somebody has to spend about 5 to 10 minutes on each one of those notices, downloading them, distributing them, and saving them into a pleadings index or to a storage location. So there's a great amount of time. And if one of those notices is missed, that could lead to a potential date being missed or a deadline being missed. And just the amount of time associated with that processing can make it to the point where you have a fire drill to put out on a Friday night because there's a notice that something's due on Monday morning. So there's a lot of risk in missing a notice and also just the delays associated with the manual processing.
Dan, how has the pandemic impacted your strategy?
We launched the ECFX notice product in February of last year at the ABA Legal Tech Show, right into the face of the pandemic a few weeks later. And there were several weeks, actually a couple months, where other than our beta clients, firms weren't really engaging in looking at new technology other than what they could do to get people online and remote work. But at the same time, the courts were also focused on adopting to that. And courts like those in New York City went to 100% electronic court filing. As a result, after things settled down and people figured out that they could work from home safely and they could still operate their businesses and law firms weren't going to go bankrupt, they realized that they needed to deal with this electronic court filing volume increases. And so we've definitely been helping out firms where this transition was more challenging for them, in part because the workforce was remote, but also in part because when you did everything by paper, you did it in different ways before. And now that they're coming in electronically, we dealt with a firm where literally the paralegals and legal assistants were fighting as to whose job it was to handle the notices coming in because no one wanted to do it. At the end of the day, automating it solved the problem for them. And so with the move of many courts to electronic court filing, I don't think we're going to see a regression there back to paper filing anytime soon.
Ted, how do you see technology impacting litigation in a post-pandemic era?
Probably the number one underlying theme today and going forward is how do we do more with less people? Every industry is being impacted today, and legal is no different. So from an IT perspective and from a practitioner side, how can firms do more with less people? And by automating these mundane, manual, repetitive tasks, people can focus on the valuable value add tasks that the law firm's clients need. So the technology is just making it so much easier for firms to do more with less. And you have to add the caveat, it has to be done accurately. And it has to be done according to the specs that the firm needs them done. So that's where technology can really play a big part, is automating processes, but doing it right every single time.
Dan, how can technology align the various electronic filing protocols around the country?
As it stands today, we have hundreds of systems out there. We have the federal system, even the PACER system's not really truly standardized. There's a bunch of different versions of it out there. There are versions at the various states, like New York, have taken up the initiative to build a statewide system. Other states like California ended up enabling the individual counties to create their own e-filing systems and contract with third-party providers. And so all of this variation leads to a lot of issues for firms that practice in multiple jurisdictions. And what we've done with technology at ECFX is we've taken that and turned that chaos into an opportunity to really simplify and automate that for the individual firms, so that when they get a notice from us, it's in the same format with the same data, no matter what jurisdiction it was filed in and no matter what format it was filed in. It comes across in the same manner. And that's one of the things that the managing partner at Schiff Hardin said that was a real game changer for them. It makes their lives so much easier and so much simpler. And that's something that technology can do that's almost impossible to be done with manual labor.
This is Ari Kaplan speaking with Dan O'Day and Ted Kukorowski, co-founder and managing director for large law, respectively, at ECFX, provider of an electronic notice management system. Dan, Ted, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ari.
Thanks, Ari.
Thank you for listening to the Reinventing Professionals podcast. Visit reinventingprofessionals.com or arikaplanadvisors.com to learn more.